Judge mocks black woman in court, then freezes when she reveals her Navy SEAL badge. A black woman stood in court facing false accusations and lies, but the power she possessed would shock everyone in that room. Officer Simmons thought he had an easy victory that morning. He didn't know Monica Jackson had a 20-year Navy SEAL background that would turn his lies upside down. Today I'm going to tell you a story about how real injustice meets ultimate triumph. Watch this story to the end because the final twist will shock you beyond belief. Before we dive into this incredible tale of justice, courage, and karma, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. The morning sun filtered through the courthouse windows as Monica Jackson sat calmly in the defendant's chair. Her dark eyes scanned the room with military precision, taking in every face, every movement. She wore a crisp white blouse and black slacks, modest but dignified. To the casual observer, she looked like any other defendant. But there was something different about her, a quiet intensity that suggested she was far from ordinary. Judge Howard Grayson entered, his silver hair catching the light. Officer Bradley Simmons sat at the plaintiff's table with a smug confidence, his police uniform pressed and pristine. "State versus Monica Jackson," the bailiff announced. Monica rose with deliberate control. Officer Simmons leaned back with an arrogant smirk, a predator sure of his prey. Monica's young lawyer, Benjamin Carter, shuffled nervously through his notes. As Simmons took the witness stand, Monica studied every detail of his body language. Years of military training had taught her to read people like open books. "On the evening in question," Simmons began confidently, "I was responding to a disturbance call. I encountered Miss Jackson loitering outside a closed business." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Loitering, the classic catch-all accusation. "When I asked what she was doing, she became hostile," he continued theatrically. "She refused to identify herself, and when I tried to de-escalate, she physically assaulted me." Gasps filled the room. Monica remained perfectly still. "She hit me in the chest and reached for my service weapon. I had no choice but to restrain her." From the back, someone muttered, "Sounds like a lie." The judge called for order. Monica's lawyer stood nervously. "Your Honor, save it for cross-examination," the judge interrupted. As Simmons returned to his seat with a satisfied grin, Monica leaned toward her lawyer. "Stay calm. Focus on the facts." "Miss Jackson, it's your turn to testify," Judge Grayson announced. Monica approached the stand with measured steps. The room fell silent as she adjusted the microphone. "The officer's account is not only inaccurate but intentionally misleading," she began calmly. The prosecutor jumped up. "Bold accusation. Do you have proof?" Monica's dark eyes were unyielding. "The truth will come to light soon enough," she continued. "I was checking directions on my phone when Officer Simmons approached with his flashlight in my face. When I asked why he needed my ID, he raised his voice and accused me of being uncooperative." "So you questioned his authority?" the prosecutor pressed. "I questioned his motive," Monica corrected firmly. "I wasn't breaking any law." Her voice remained steady. "When I asked for clarification, he grabbed my arm. When I told him to let go, he tightened his grip and said, 'Women like you need to learn how to listen.'" Gasps erupted. The judge banged his gavel. "He slammed me against his patrol car and handcuffed me, claiming I reached for his weapon, which is completely false." The courtroom had taken on an electric atmosphere. Every word Monica spoke seemed to chip away at the carefully constructed narrative that Officer Simmons and the prosecution had built. But Monica wasn't finished. She had been patient, methodical, building her case brick by brick. Now it was time to reveal the foundation upon which her entire defense rested. Benjamin Carter, who had been taking notes furiously, looked up at his client with a mixture of admiration and nervousness. He knew what was coming next, and he knew it would change everything. Judge Grayson leaned forward in his chair, his earlier skepticism giving way to something that looked almost like curiosity. He had presided over thousands of cases in his career, but there was something about Monica Jackson that set her apart from other defendants. There was a quiet strength about her, a composure that seemed almost unnatural for someone facing serious criminal charges. The prosecutor, meanwhile, was beginning to show signs of frustration. His usual tactics weren't working. Monica refused to be rattled, refused to be drawn into emotional responses that he could use against her. Instead, she answered every question with the same measured calm, the same unwavering confidence. "Miss Jackson," he said, his voice taking on a sharper edge, "you're asking this court to believe that Officer Simmons, a decorated member of the force, fabricated an entire incident. Do you have anything to back up your version of events?" Monica smiled faintly, a subtle but powerful shift in her demeanor. "The truth always has a way of revealing itself, counselor. You'll see soon enough." The judge leaned forward. "Miss Jackson, are you implying there is evidence the court has not yet seen?" Monica's lawyer, Benjamin Carter, stood quickly. "Your Honor, we intend to submit additional evidence during the proceedings." The prosecutor scoffed. "More stalling tactics, Your Honor. If the defense had anything substantial, they would have presented it already." Monica turned to face the judge, her voice carrying a weight that seemed to fill the entire courtroom. "Your Honor, the truth takes time, but I promise you this. When it comes out, it will be undeniable." The judge studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. We'll recess for today. Court will reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. As the gavel came down, the courtroom erupted into whispers. Monica rose from the stand, her movements calm and deliberate. She walked past Officer Simmons, who avoided her gaze, and joined her lawyer at the defense table. "Are you sure about this?" Carter whispered, his voice filled with doubt. Monica placed a hand on his arm, her grip steady and reassuring. "Trust me, Ben. Tomorrow, the truth will speak louder than anything Simmons could ever say." As she walked out of the courtroom, the murmurs of the crowd followed her, a mix of curiosity and speculation. Outside, the sun was setting, casting the town in a warm, golden glow. Monica paused on the courthouse steps, her eyes scanning the horizon. The fight was far from over, but she was ready. She had always been ready. That evening, Monica met with Benjamin Carter at her modest home on the outskirts of town. The house, surrounded by tall oak trees, was a sanctuary of calm after the chaos of the courtroom. "Monica," Benjamin said as they sat in her living room, "we need to talk about tomorrow. The jury needs to understand not just what happened that night, but who you are. Your background, your service, it all matters." Monica nodded, walking to a bookshelf and pulling out a leather-bound folder. It was worn but well-maintained, the edges frayed slightly from years of use. She placed it on the coffee table between them. "This is my service record," she said simply. "Everything you need to know about me is in there." Benjamin opened the folder carefully, his eyes widening as he scanned the contents. Discharge papers, commendations, training certifications, the evidence of a career spent in service to her country. "Monica," he breathed, "this changes everything. Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because it's not just about who I was," she said, leaning forward. "It's about what Simmons represents. This isn't just my fight, Ben. It's about exposing the kind of corruption and bias that allows people like him to get away with this." Benjamin ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. The prosecutor's going to lose it when this comes out, and Simmons, he'll crumble. Monica's expression darkened. "Simmons won't crumble. Men like him double down when they're cornered. That's why we have to be smart, strategic." As the night wore on, they planned their strategy for the next day. Monica would reveal her background, but not just as a way to defend herself. She would use it to expose the larger issues at play, the assumptions, the biases, the systemic problems that allowed incidents like this to happen. The next morning, the courthouse was packed. Word had spread about the previous day's testimony, and the local media had picked up the story. The gallery was filled with supporters, skeptics, and curious onlookers, all waiting to see how the drama would unfold. Monica entered the courtroom with the same quiet confidence she had displayed the day before. She wore a navy blue blazer and matching slacks, professional, dignified, commanding respect without demanding it. Officer Simmons looked less composed than he had the previous day. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by a tightness around his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept well. His fellow officers, who had shown up in solidarity, seemed less certain of their support. Judge Grayson called the court to order, and the room fell silent. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, "you may proceed with your defense." Benjamin Carter rose slowly, his movements deliberate. He had spent the night preparing for this moment, and now it was time to deliver. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice carrying more confidence than it had the previous day. "Yesterday you heard Officer Simmons's version of events. Today, you're going to hear the truth." He walked over to Monica, who remained seated at the defense table, her hands folded calmly in her lap. "Miss Jackson," he said, "would you please tell the court about your background?" Monica stood, and for a moment, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She walked to the witness stand with the measured pace of someone accustomed to command, to respect, to being listened to when she spoke. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Monica Jackson, retired United States Navy," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the silent courtroom. "I served my country for 20 years as a Navy SEAL. The impact was immediate and dramatic. Gasps echoed through the gallery, and even Judge Grayson's eyebrows rose in surprise. Officer Simmons went pale, his jaw dropping slightly before he quickly tried to compose himself. Monica continued, her voice steady and strong. "During my service, I completed multiple deployments to combat zones, led teams in some of the world's most dangerous operations, and received commendations for valor, leadership, and dedication to duty." She turned slightly to address the jury directly. "I have faced enemies on foreign soil, protected American interests abroad, and served alongside some of the finest men and women our country has to offer. I have been trained to handle high-stress situations, to remain calm under fire, and to make split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death." The courtroom was completely silent now, every person hanging on her every word. "The night I encountered Officer Simmons," she continued, "I used that training. I remained calm. I followed proper protocol. I did not resist until my constitutional rights were violated. I did not threaten him. I did not reach for his weapon, and I certainly did not pose any physical threat to a trained police officer." She paused, letting her words sink in, then continued with a slight edge to her voice. "What I did do was refuse to be intimidated. I refused to accept that my presence in my own neighborhood was somehow suspicious. I refused to bow down to someone who saw my skin color before my humanity." The prosecutor jumped to his feet. "Objection. The defendant is making inflammatory statements." "Overruled," Judge Grayson said firmly. "The witness may continue." Monica turned her gaze to Officer Simmons, who was now visibly uncomfortable in his seat. "Officer Simmons made assumptions about me that night. He saw what he expected to see, heard what he expected to hear, and treated me the way he thought I deserved to be treated. But his assumptions were wrong." She faced the jury again. "I am not a threat to public safety. I'm not someone who needs to learn how to listen. I'm a decorated veteran who has served this country with honor and distinction, and I will not accept being treated as anything less." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the court reporter seemed to have stopped typing, caught up in the power of Monica's words. Benjamin Carter stepped forward. "Miss Jackson, in your professional opinion, as someone trained in tactical operations and threat assessment, was Officer Simmons's use of force that night justified?" "Absolutely not," Monica replied without hesitation. "There was no threat present. His actions were driven by bias, not by any legitimate security concern." "And how do you know this?" Monica's expression hardened slightly. "Because I've been in real dangerous situations. I know what actual threats look like, and Officer Simmons wasn't responding to one that night. He was responding to his own prejudices." The prosecutor rose for cross-examination, but his earlier confidence had evaporated. He approached the witness stand like a man walking through a minefield, unsure where to step. "Miss Jackson," he began, his voice lacking its previous authority, "your military service is admirable, but it doesn't change what happened that night." "You're right," Monica replied calmly. "It doesn't change what happened. It just proves that Officer Simmons's version of events is impossible." The prosecutor frowned. "How so?" "Because a Navy SEAL doesn't panic in a traffic stop. A Navy SEAL doesn't resist arrest by flailing around and reaching for weapons. If I had wanted to resist Officer Simmons, the encounter would have ended very differently. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. Are you threatening a police officer? I'm explaining tactical reality, Monica replied evenly. Officer Simmons claims I was aggressive, that I reached for his weapon, that I posed a physical threat. But if that were true, if a trained special operations soldier had actually intended to harm him, do you really think he would have walked away uninjured? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The prosecutor looked toward Simmons, who was now sweating visibly. The truth is, Monica continued, I never posed any threat to Officer Simmons. His story falls apart the moment you consider who I actually am and what I'm actually capable of. The prosecutor tried a different approach. Miss Jackson, isn't it possible that your military training made the officer feel threatened? Monica's eyes flashed. My military training taught me discipline, respect, and de-escalation. It taught me to follow lawful orders and to treat others with dignity. If Officer Simmons felt threatened by those qualities, that says more about him than it does about me. Benjamin Carter stood up. Objection. The prosecutor is badgering the witness. Sustained, Judge Grayson ruled. Move on, counselor. The prosecutor made several more attempts to undermine Monica's credibility, but each effort seemed to backfire. Monica answered every question with the same calm precision, the same unshakable confidence. It became increasingly clear that she was not just another defendant. She was someone who commanded respect, someone whose word carried weight. Finally, the prosecutor gave up. No further questions, he said, returning to his table with obvious frustration. But Monica wasn't finished. As she prepared to step down from the witness stand, she turned to address the courtroom one final time. I want to be clear about something, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. I didn't reveal my background to gain sympathy or to claim special treatment. I revealed it because the truth matters. Officer Simmons didn't just lie about what happened that night. He insulted every person who has ever worn the uniform, who has ever served something greater than themselves. She looked directly at Simmons. You took an oath to protect and serve. I took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That night, you became the very thing I swore to defend against. The courtroom erupted. Some people applauded, others gasped, and a few of Simmons's fellow officers looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats as they processed what they had just heard. Judge Grayson banged his gavel repeatedly. Order! Order in the court! But even he seemed moved by Monica's words, his usual stoic demeanor showing cracks of emotion. As Monica returned to the defense table, Benjamin Carter stood to address the court. Your Honor, the defense has additional evidence to present. He walked to a table where several items were laid out, covered by a cloth. With dramatic flair, he pulled away the covering to reveal a laptop computer and several printed documents. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said, what you're about to see will prove beyond any doubt that Officer Simmons not only lied about what happened that night, but has made a pattern of such lies. The prosecutor jumped to his feet. Objection. This evidence wasn't disclosed during discovery. Your Honor, Carter replied, this evidence only came to light after Miss Jackson's testimony yesterday. We received it this morning from a confidential source. Judge Grayson considered for a moment. I'll allow it, but proceed carefully, Mr. Carter. Carter opened the laptop and connected it to the courtroom's projection system. The large screen at the front of the room flickered to life. What you're seeing, Carter said, are Officer Simmons's body camera recordings from the past 2 years. Thanks to a concerned officer within the department, we now have access to footage that was conveniently lost or had technical malfunctions during previous incidents. The first video began to play. It showed Simmons during another traffic stop, this time with a young Hispanic man. The audio was clear. You people need to learn respect, Simmons could be heard saying, echoing the same language he had used with Monica. The second video showed another incident, this time with an elderly black woman. Again, Simmons's bias was evident in both his words and his actions. Your Honor, Carter continued, we have documentation of 17 separate incidents where Officer Simmons's body camera mysteriously malfunctioned during encounters with minority citizens. 17 times when the very technology designed to protect both officers and civilians somehow failed at the crucial moment. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs of disbelief. Even some of the police officers in the gallery looked uncomfortable. Carter introduced more evidence, complaint forms that had been buried, witness statements that had been ignored, and a pattern of behavior that painted Officer Simmons not as a dedicated public servant, but as someone who had been abusing his authority for years. The prosecution wants you to believe that Miss Jackson was the aggressor that night, Carter said, addressing the jury directly. But the evidence shows that she was just the latest victim in a long line of citizens who have been targeted by Officer Simmons simply because of the color of their skin. Monica watched from the defense table, her expression somber but determined. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had been mistreated by Simmons, every complaint that had been dismissed, every injustice that had been ignored. Officer Simmons slumped in his chair, the weight of the evidence crushing his earlier confidence. His fellow officers had stopped looking at him, their solidarity replaced by embarrassment and anger. The prosecutor requested a recess, but Judge Grayson denied it. We'll proceed, he said firmly. This court needs to hear all the evidence. The prosecutor's closing argument was brief and half-hearted. The evidence had been overwhelming, and there was little he could say to salvage his case. He made a final plea for the jury to consider the complexities of police work, but his words fell flat in the face of Monica's testimony and the damning evidence against Simmons. Benjamin Carter's closing argument was powerful and passionate. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, you have seen the truth today. You have seen a decorated war hero stand up to injustice with the same courage she showed in defense of our nation. Monica Jackson didn't come to court today asking for special treatment because of her service. She came asking for what every American deserves, justice. He gestured toward Officer Simmons. The defendant in this case isn't Monica Jackson. The real defendant is a system that allows officers like Simmons to abuse their power, to lie with impunity, and to treat citizens like second-class human beings based on nothing more than the color of their skin. Carter's voice rose with emotion. Monica Jackson served 20 years protecting the freedoms we all enjoy. She faced down enemies abroad so that we could live safely at home. Are we really going to let her be convicted of a crime she didn't commit, based on the lies of a man who has made a career out of targeting people who look like her? He paused, looking each juror in the eye. I don't think so. I think you're going to do what's right. I think you're going to send a message that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated, not in our community, not in our country. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, their faces were somber but determined. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Grayson asked. The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. In the case of State versus Monica Jackson, we find the defendant not guilty on all charges. The courtroom exploded in applause. Monica remained composed, but there were tears in her eyes as she embraced her attorney, but the foreman wasn't finished. Furthermore, Your Honor, the jury strongly recommends that criminal charges be filed against Officer Simmons for perjury and abuse of power. We also recommend a full investigation into the police department's handling of citizen complaints. Judge Grayson nodded gravely. The court accepts these recommendations. Officer Simmons, you are hereby ordered to surrender your badge and weapon. Criminal charges will be filed against you within the week. As Simmons was led away in handcuffs, Monica stood and addressed the courtroom one final time. This victory isn't just mine, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. It belongs to everyone who has ever been told they don't belong, everyone who has ever been judged by their appearance rather than their character. Justice isn't just about one case, one verdict. It's about ensuring that what happened to me never happens to anyone else. Months later, Officer Simmons was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to 5 years in prison. 17 cases involving his misconduct were reopened, leading to dozens of overturned convictions and millions of dollars in settlements. The police department underwent massive reforms, including new training programs on bias and de-escalation, mandatory body cameras that couldn't be turned off, and an independent review board to handle complaints against officers. Monica returned to her quiet life, but her story became a symbol of courage and justice. She was invited to speak at police academies, law schools, and community events, sharing her message that true strength comes not from the uniform you wear or the authority you wield, but from standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Benjamin Carter went on to become one of the state's most respected civil rights attorneys, inspired by the case that launched his career. And in courtrooms across the country, Monica Jackson's name became synonymous with the principle that justice delayed is not justice denied. Sometimes it's justice perfectly timed. The system that failed Monica that night was forced to confront its failures. Real change began with one woman's refusal to accept injustice, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon against corruption is simply telling the truth. This story reminds us that justice isn't guaranteed. It has to be fought for, defended, and earned. And sometimes it comes from the most unexpected heroes, wearing the most unassuming disguises, carrying the most powerful weapons of all, truth, courage, and an unwavering belief that right will prevail. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe for more powerful tales of justice, courage, and triumph. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that reminds us why fighting for what's right always matters, no matter the odds. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.